It appears the battle for Mariupol might be over. I mean, there's the considerable cost for both sides, I think, is an understatement. It's hard to really encapsulate the costs that have been paid in this city. But is it clear to you who wins and who's lost? Who really benefits from this battle in this key city, and how long it's dragged out?
Well, this may be a Pyrrhic victory for the Russians, frankly. They have lost innumerable soldiers, a lot of equipment. Yes, they will own the battlefield, but at the end of the day, the cost to them has been staggering. And I frankly, these Ukrainian soldiers have been extraordinary. They have just been as determined as one could ever imagine. This has been the Alamo of Ukraine. They have shown resourcefulness, they've shown creativity, innovation using that steel plant. And of course, all these tunnels and bunkers and so forth that were built into it back in the days of the Cold War, very, very skillfully. And I'm sure, again, that many of them are really quite reluctant to surrender. But I think the high command has their interests at heart. They've done what they can do for this country, and it's time for them to surrender. The Russians will hold them for a period, and then, touch wood, they'll be exchanged in a prisoner exchange with Russia. But again, the cost to Russia has been staggering. There will be units now that will be freed up, of course, that can go into the fighting as Russia tries to expand the amount of territory that they control. And they're having some costly degree of success in the very southeast part of the country. And that's one to watch because that's where they still are on the move. But then beyond that, I think the Russians are going to start to harden the front lines of the areas that they have seized, maybe even annex those areas into the Russian Federation and say, these are part of Russia now. And if you attack us, you now incur potentially, again, the nuclear, they'll rattle that particular saber again. That's, I think, what we have to look forward to in the weeks ahead. And also, of course, what can the Ukrainians do while they have momentum still in the eastern part of the country, where they've counterattacked against the Russians, pushed them out of artillery range of Kharkiv, and could perhaps turn to the southeast and roll up the flank of the Russians. I'm sure that's their hope, because once the Russians can harden these front lines, and if they can incorporate urban areas in them, we know how hard it is to take urban areas because the Russians have struggled to do that really around the country, with the exception, again, of Mariupol and a couple of others in the south. But the Ukrainians would then have that challenge, and that will be a difficult one. And that's where we'll see the war potentially enter yet another phase.
That also speaks to the bigger question of what do you think will define winning this war? What do you think should, General?
Well, it's a very, very good question, because what has happened, I think, Kate, is that Ukraine has defined winning in different ways as this has gone on. I suspect in the beginning that they, and maybe the US and many in the West, would have defined winning as retaining some part of the Ukraine territory from which they could conduct an insurgency or something. And clearly they have achieved vastly more than I think most observers expected would be the case. And of course, all of us have reassessed. We've constantly done this process of, oh, well, gosh, now, so what is winning now? And the challenge here is that for the Ukrainians right now, their definition of winning is at the very least retaking all of the ground that Russia has taken since the invasion of 24 February. And in some cases, it's to retake that part of the southeastern part of the country that was controlled by the Russian-supported separatists, and also Crimea. And I don't know that those are achievable. But we do need to keep in mind, again, that this is about what President Zelensky and his people can accept, not what we are saying, well, maybe you ought to give up part of your country and you can get a peace agreement. And this, he's the one who has to decide. And keep in mind as well that he has said that he will put the terms of any agreement with Russia to the people in a referendum. And he's got to be certain that they will accept that. So this redefinition of victory as the war has gone on and as the Ukrainians have shown themselves to be so impressive and the Russians have so underperformed, that process still does continue. I fear that the objectives, particularly of President Zelensky and the Ukrainian people, especially if it's to expel them from Crimea, on top of everything else, may prove to be more than are achievable.
General, it's great to have you on. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.
In Lviv, standing by for us, we've got Suzanne Malveaux. Suzanne, you've been following so much about what's been happening on the ground, specifically in Mariupol. You and I have been talking about Azovstal for quite some time this week. But importantly, we've also seen Zelensky coming out, talking about missile strikes in various parts of the country, concerns that you're seeing a heightened Russian aggression, clearly, where you can clearly see what the military strategy is for Russia right now.
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, if you take a look at just the damage in the areas that they keep hitting over and over, just north of Kyiv, in that small village of Desna, that's about 40 miles from the border of Belarus. Again, we heard President Zelensky saying there are many, many dead, and those are the civilians in that area, in that region, that they continue to try to push back the Ukrainian defenses. And also in the east, in the Donbass, as we have discussed time and time again, the Donetsk and the Luhansk regions, the Russian-controlled regions, if they are trying to just create that land bridge, if you will, to the Crimea, to make that kind of progress, to disrupt the trade, the economy, the communications of the Ukrainian people with the rest of the world. And so they continue to pummel that area in Luhansk. And it is devastating when you see the civilian casualties just over the last 24 hours, 12 who were killed, 60 structures down, and in one particular city, 70% of the housing actually destroyed. So we've been presented with many images of the destruction there, and they are trying to really break the Ukrainian people. And then, as you say, Mariupol, in the steel plant there, 2,000 who have been evacuated, at least according to the Russian statistics. Most of them are in the military, but it is a Russian-controlled type of detention center, and also about 50 or so severely wounded. We are told, at least, that they're being treated, again, Russian-controlled hospital facility. Many of the families just don't know where their loved ones are, and the mystery remains. Inside of that steel plant, there are still hundreds who are left there. Those soldiers, we have heard from many of them as they've been posting on social media. CNN has, of course, gone through the process of verifying these posts. One soldier on Instagram within the last 24 hours, seemingly he's been providing lots and lots of beautiful pictures, but seemingly saying goodbye. At least that's what it seems in his post. He said, that's it. Thank you for the shelter. Azovstal, the place of my death and my life. We have also heard from various military officials inside of various rankings, some of them pledging in video statements not to surrender, that the fight has just begun. The top commander of the unit inside of the steel plant, however, has called for his soldiers to surrender, saying that to please stop the mission of protecting those in Mariupol, to save yourselves. Nevertheless, a deputy commander releasing this video statement suggesting that there is more afoot.
My command and I are on the territory of Azovstal plant. An operation is underway. I will not give any details. I'm grateful to the whole world and to Ukraine for support. See you.
So it is uncertain the fate of many of those, the hundreds who still remain inside the steel plant, as many Ukrainians look to them as really the last hope, a symbol of Ukrainian resistance against the Russians.
Suzanne Malveaux, thank you very much for those details.